What's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Finitso Atlas, and this is actually the second Fintiso that we've checked out on the channel after previously taking a look at the harp. With the harp, I was really impressed with how well it was executed, so when Fintiso reached out about potentially checking out the Atlas, I definitely jumped at the opportunity. Now, despite being made by the same company, two very different knives stylistically. With the harp, we had aluminum scales. This time around, we have G10. We go from thumb studs to multiple deployment methods on the Atlas. We have both a thumb hole as well as that flipper tab. And of course, we're swapping out the button lock for the more traditional liner lock on the Atlas. Now, despite all of those differences, one key similarity, maybe even the most important, is that both of these are super approachable, affordable knives, firmly in that budget territory. You can pick up the Atlas over on Amazon or even directly from Fintiso for around $45. So I'll make sure to leave a link to that down in the description if you're interested in picking this one up. Now, in terms of sizing, this is a larger knife without being too unwieldy. Comes in at about 7.9 inches overall. So really good size if you're looking for that budget workhorse. I think this is a really excellent candidate. Generous 4.5 inches on the handle, so easily able to get that full 4-finger grip. Great comfortable ergos on this. My favorite feature ergonomically, and there's no hot spots or anything like that, but again, my favorite feature is probably this ramp up before that drop point style blade, and it has some jimping on there. That's probably my favorite style of jimping. It's ultra grabby without being too aggressive and sharp where it's a little bit uncomfortable, but it definitely does a job. You're not going to be sliding forward or backwards once you have that thumb in position. Just does a really great job of grabbing onto your thumb and keeping it in place without being uncomfortable. Probably my least favorite feature of these ergos has to be that flipper tab, and that's going to come down to preference. I'm someone who doesn't love flipper tabs because I really like to get right behind the blade as close as possible, usually in line with the pivot, if not even slightly forward from that. And so this feels like my grip is a little bit further back than I'd like, although it's still extremely comfortable. It's just kind of a little bit outside of my preference zone. Now, the blade, on the other hand, is short enough where you can still easily quickly creep up and get right behind that tip for those utility cuts and really comfortable in that position. And so we're looking at 3.38 inches on that blade. 14C28N. With the OD green that you see here, you're going to get the coated blade. With the black version, you get the satin blade. This black coated blade does have a subtle stonewash on it, which I really like. I think it ups the look by quite a bit. I'm a big fan of black wash, and in fact, I wouldn't have minded if they dialed it up a notch even more aggressively, where you get those deep washes. I think with both stonewash and black wash finishes, the more the better. Just looks a little bit cooler, and it's going to hide any blemishes or marks from use a little bit better when it's a more aggressive stonewash. But either way, I do think the blade looks great, and it's all matched to that hardware. So we have the Fintiso pivot and the screws, even our pocket clip. In terms of the weight on here, we have G10 scales, a little bit of weight savings on the nested liners on the show side, not really any on the pile side, but a little bit on the heavy side for this size of knife at 4.1 ounces. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure I felt the same way about the harp, just being a little bit on the heavier side for its blade length. But either way, it doesn't feel super heavy in hand. You do notice it a little bit in pocket though. Now, in terms of those deployment methods, it is on ball bearings and so incredibly smooth, and both of the deployment methods are done extremely well. So starting with that flipper tab, it has a little bit of jimping here on the back, really easy to grab onto. I wouldn't mind if that ramped a little bit lower so it's not quite sticking out as much, but it is really easy to catch and super snappy. The detent feels perfect on it. Really, really well dialed in for the flipper tab. Now, in regards to the thumb hole, one of the things that I really like, there's a little bit of contouring on the handle to get into there, and you have access with both your thumb and middle finger. Sometimes it's sort of a one or the other type deal because of the layout of it. You can middle finger flick it, but you can't thumb flick it, or vice versa. In this case, I have no problem getting my middle finger in there to flick it open, which is my preferred opening method. And then same thing with my thumb. You can get the meat of your thumb in there, flick that open just as easily. So nice access from both sides. The liner lock has plenty of access as well, really easy to get onto there. There is some jimping, as you can see. Fortunately, it's not too aggressive. Sometimes with jimping on liners, for whatever reason, it just kind of eats my fingers apart if it's too sharp, and this one is just about perfect, doesn't really eat your fingers apart. You don't really notice it. It's maybe could be a little bit more aggressive, but I'd prefer a little bit less aggressive and just more access to it like we have here than that super aggressive chew your finger apart every time you disengage the lock. And so really like how that's done. The only drawback again with this liner lock is going to be that that flipper tab does drop down onto your nail. So this is never really just going to drop shut on you. It's going to drop to your nail and you can shake it the rest of the way. It is incredibly smooth, and for some people that's not a downside, because if the flipper tab doesn't do that, usually it's the corner of the blade and it starts chewing up your nail. But I've just kind of come to get used to that, and I really don't mind that. But either way, it is incredibly smooth, and both the thumbs hole and the flipper tab, the detent feels just about perfect, really well dialed in, which again isn't always the case. Sometimes one is clearly favored over the other and just works a little bit better. I think in this case, whichever your preference, they both work equally well. Love the blade shape on here. We have a partial flat grind. They also seem to do a really good job on their factory edges, super sharp out of the box with both this and the harp. I'm not sure if they do their own manufacturing or if they have an OEM that's doing it, but either way, they seem to come with a great factory edge. Have that matching hardware, like I mentioned. Lanyard hole in the back, nice placement there, kind of right out of the way. If you put that lanyard in there, it's not going to be in the way of opening or closing. And of course the pocket clip, which is something I was really pleasantly surprised by. I think this is a huge upgrade over what we saw on the harp, which was more of the bent style pocket clip. This seems like it's either milled or maybe machine injection molded. I'm almost positive it's not titanium, probably some sort of stainless steel, but it looks great. I love the style of it. It is super stout, but enough to really easily slide in and out of the pocket. It's got a great design. I think it looks really good, and it's also more deep carry than what we saw on the harp. Only downside is going to be the same downside we had on the harp, and that is that it's not reversible, unfortunately. So not super lefty friendly with this knife or with the harp, but otherwise I do love the pocket clip on this. I think it's a huge upgrade and really something a little bit nicer than we typically see on this price range of knives. So big fan of the pocket clip this time around. Also that style, again, I think is a really clean design. I love the blade shape on it. I think it looks great. I love the thumb ramp, obviously. I mentioned that being my favorite part of the ergos. Looks good, feels good, and just overall a pretty simple and clean design. I'm a big fan of what Fintiso is doing though. They don't have a ton of models out, but the ones that I've seen have been really well thought out, and it seems like they're taking their time to get them right. So big fan of what they're doing. Would love to hear your thoughts on this one though down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, joining the channel as a member, or even checking out some of my other videos. All help out the channel a ton. And again, I'll make sure to link to this one down in the description if it's something you're interested in picking up. But as always, hope you have a great one. Take care.